this entire time. So beyond their daily checklists and space-to-ground coordinations to prepare the cargo for departure, they filled their time with additional Earth observations.
Now, as you might imagine, packing the cargo onto their Dragon must be done in a very particular order. Everything is super choreographed if you've listened to any of our broadcasts before. Now, because of this, the teams have run a mass analysis for the vehicle's return. It starts by packing personal items and clothing, then packing the science that the crew studied while aboard the ISS. The final cargo loaded are the cold bags packed with passive temperature controls known as ice breaks. Now, at the moment, Dragon is doing a couple of things autonomously. It's isolating the thermal control system fluid loops from the radiator. This system is what will help keep the internal temperature of Dragon comfortable for our crew during the reentry phase. And then after that, we'll wait for the claw to separate. The claw is what connects the trunk to the capsule itself. It delivers power, telemetry, and fluids, and the claw step is the first step in that trunk separation process. So we, of course, need to separate the trunk or jettison the trunk in order to expose the heat shield, and because the heat shield is located at the bottom part of the pressurized section of Dragon, which is where our crew is. So there, actually, you can see we have a lovely little animation. So the top part is the pressurized section that I was just talking about. That's where the crew is seated currently. And then the bottom half, the part that's half black, half white, that is the trunk. And that is the part that we jettison. And right in between the two where the heat shield is. So that, of course, is what we need to expose in order for the crew to make their reentry through the Earth's atmosphere.
Exactly right. Yeah, and so as we mentioned, there's a number of steps that get us all the way up to splashdown. And to remind folks who are just tuning in, we're just about an hour out from splashdown. So, before that, as Kate mentioned, we have claw separation, trunk separation. We get into a number of deorbit burns. We mentioned earlier that there is a planned LOS, or loss of signal or communications, followed by a reacquisition of that signal prior to us seeing the parachutes deploy, the very noticeable orange and white parachutes that you mentioned, slowing us down from 350 to 15 miles an hour, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. And then finally splashdown, so close to the hour. So stay tuned closely, and we'll be following it very closely.
Yeah, everything happens what seems like in very quick succession.
Yeah.
But at this point in time, the crew has put their suits back on. They are in their seats, strapped in using their, what are basically seatbelts, but they're actually 5-point safety harnesses. And we are anticipating that claw separation to occur around 9:11 a.m., which is now. So there on the left side of your screen is a live view of Mission Control Center here in Hawthorne, SpaceX headquarters, which is located just behind us. So there our mission controllers are on console communicating with Dragon as we anticipate the claw separation and trunk separation. And there on your screen right now, that looks like Sarah Gillis, our SpaceX Core or Crew Operations and Resources Engineer. That is the person who is responsible for keeping in communication with the crew themselves.
Right. So, but it's important during operations like these too to have kind of a single voice talking with crew. We hear the term Capcom quite a bit for SpaceX's Core. But having that one single voice to communicate between all of the ground operations going on and crew, is really essential for crew to just be able to hear a single known voice and, proceed with their operations on the vehicle.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we've mentioned before, the crew is in their seats. They have donned or put on their spacesuits once again. And actually, there's our first live view of the Axiom-1 crew inside our Dragon capsule. They have undocked from the International Space Station. That occurred at 9:10 p.m. Eastern yesterday, April 25th. And very excited to see them. They've, as you mentioned before, they've been in space a little longer than anticipated. Probably to no one's dislike.
Right.
But they are coming home today, thanks to the weather finally cooperating for us.
Exactly. And that's one of many variables, right? It was the same thing that we talked during launch, for those of you who were with us during launch. And Kate mentioned earlier, everything is very choreographed for all of these operations, whether it's launch on orbit, their time on orbit, or coming back home. Everything's very choreographed and pre-analyzed, and we have to fit within those certain parameters in order to successfully undock and come home. And you can't see it there, but I don't know if you noticed, Kate, but when we got that first live view of the capsule, there's an Ax-1 logo, or an Ax-1 patch.
The sticker.
The sticker was on the vehicle, so
a
that's a good point of pride. We have a third one in there now.
Oh, for
I
sure.
love it. Yeah.
Now, for those of you who might not be familiar, the Dragon capsule that the Ax-1 crew is flying in today has been to space twice before, actually. It previously supported the NASA SpaceX Demo 2 mission, which was the first time that NASA astronauts departed to space from American soil since the retirement of the space shuttle in 2011. That was in we did that Demo 2 mission in 2020. Seems like just yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, when we flew NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley to the International Space Station. And that capsule also supported the Crew 2 mission. So those are the other two stickers that we saw there inside the capsule. The Demo 2 sticker, the Crew 2 sticker. Oh, there it is right there, just on the right-hand side. And now the Ax-1 sticker.
Exactly. No, it was really cool seeing on launch. We saw the Demo 2 and the Crew sticker, and so I really love just being able to see the Ax-1 sticker on the way back now. It's marked. It's a permanent piece of history. I love that.
Now, at this time, I am able to confirm that we have had claw separation and trunk separation. So that is super exciting. Once again, we do that in order to expose the heat shield. So that is another physical change to the capsule itself. Once again, gosh, I just love this view that we have. So this shot is over the shoulders of Commander MLA Michael Lopez Alegria and pilot Larry Connor. And that view, we can see what they're seeing. Now, something that's, I think, pretty cool about Dragon is that it's mostly autonomous. The point for Dragon is that the capsule does most of the thinking, most of the driving itself, all of it, actually. And while the crew has the ability to back up the systems if necessary, the Dragon flies itself for the most part. And I just love being able to see what they're able to see there. The view that we saw was an indicator of which thrusters are firing. So the thruster number will light up once we get that view back again. But it's super exciting to see just the controls that they have, and man, just to be up there and think, we're going home today.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think what's really interesting, too, is, MLA mentioned before his flight how excited he was, particularly about the Dragon capsule. He's flown in shuttle, and interestingly enough, he has flown on the shuttle Endeavour, right, on STS-113. So going from something like shuttle to what the Dragon capsule is, it's a completely different experience, but he can compare those two systems and see how far the vehicle development has come since his days in the shuttle, and something autonomous like that, but you still have good controls into. He seemed really excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine.
Yeah.
Being able to say that you've been to space not once but multiple times and in different vehicles, that's quite an accomplishment.
It really is, yeah. Yeah, and I can only imagine what the training was like for it too. The last time you'd trained for something like the actual cockpit you'd be in, it was a shuttle, completely different. I've gotten to go inside shuttle cockpit trainers, and it is intimidating. Not being a pilot myself, but loving systems and being able to geek out on the switches. That was overwhelming, But then we got a chance to go sit and see the Dragon training capsule after launch, and I was astounded at the simplicity of it. But it, like you said, crew has the ability to interact with the system when they need to, and that's the important thing.
Yeah. Now there's a view once again inside Dragon Endeavour with our Ax-1 crew. They undocked from the International Space Station last night. They are now preparing for a re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere. We're targeting a splashdown outside Jacksonville as our primary launch site today. And for those, all right, so I have confirmation that deorbit burn has begun.
Fantastic.
You can actually see on the screen there on the right-hand side, so that would be in front of pilot Larry Connor's view on the right-hand side. You can see which Draco thrusters are firing. So this deorbit burn lasts about 10 minutes, Within the last 10 minutes, Dragon jettisoned its trunk and initiated the deorbit burn just a couple minutes ago. Like I said, this burn lasts about 10 minutes. And this is the last time that we'll use those 4 forward Draco thrusters. So those are the Draco thrusters that are on top of the capsule. Dragon has not yet entered the Earth's atmosphere. This deorbit burn is what will line the vehicle up and put it on its final trajectory for the landing site, which, like I mentioned, is outside Jacksonville, Florida, in the Atlantic Ocean. Right now, our crew are using their screens to keep tabs on that burn duration, Draco thruster firings, like as we saw, we saw those flashes of which Dracos were firing, and trajectory details like entry angle, capsule perigee, and how much distance remaining until the deorbit burn finishes. So important information to have.
Yeah.
Dragon is flying itself, as I mentioned, so all the crew has to do is stay strapped in their seats and keep tabs on things. Now, once it's time for our crew to splash down back on planet Earth, they'll be heading to one of 7 targeted sites supported by SpaceX. All of these sites are located either off the coast of, or all of them are located off the coast of Florida, either in the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean. Spreading out the supported sites across multiple locations helps to actually maximize the return opportunities for this mission and future crews, lowering the chance that we'll have to wave off due to bad weather. So for those of you following along, you'll know that the high winds have been quite the challenge for us the last couple of days. But today, the weather is looking great for Dragon's return to Earth. Since Dragon is capable of splashdown on either side of the Florida Panhandle, we have 2 identical and fully equipped recovery vessels ready to support, one in the Gulf of Mexico and the other in the Atlantic Ocean.
Right, and in the lead up to today, SpaceX has selected primary and alternate splashdown locations off the coast of Florida, like Kate was mentioning. The selection process takes into account a lot of different variables, including what landing sites are available and which have favorable weather. Like you mentioned earlier, Kate, high winds, some rain, it's all been a challenge. But that's why we have redundancies, right? So, today our primary landing site gets the crew home off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. And for return, we'll be looking at a number of weather items. Some of the obvious ones are no rain or chance of lightning in the recovery zone, both for the safety of the crew inside the capsule and also the recovery teams on the water that assist crew. So we're also looking for wind speeds less than 15 feet per second or about only 10 miles per hour and relatively calm seas. So it's a pretty precise place you need to splash down in. So that we can safely execute recovery operations, which includes landing a helicopter on the recovery ship to fly our crew back to shore.
Yeah, so with all those conditions and even having 7 recovery sites to choose from, you can imagine that the teams have been doing a lot of evaluations over the last few days, trying to bring the crew home safely and quickly, but ultimately just day after day making the call that the weather was not playing along. So once again, the weather conditions today look really good. The term I like to use is super go.
Super go.
For these operations, SpaceX closely coordinates with the United States Coast Guard to establish a safety zone to ensure public safety and for the safety of those involved in the recovery operations, as well as the crew on board returning with the spacecraft. Now, multiple notices are issued to the mariners in advance during recovery operations. Coast Guard and patrol boats are deployed to discourage boaters from entering splashdown zones.
Right, and because of that, we want to stress to the public, the need to respect this safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a very hazardous operation, and any other boats interfering in the area not only increase the risk to the astronauts in the capsule, but also the teams working to recover them from the water. And that's not even to say the risk that it poses to the people that are in the area. So, to protect yourselves as well and the safety of the crew, we recommend that you sit back and just enjoy the show, just as crews do on their splashdown. We'll be bringing you the best possible views of our astronauts' homecoming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting closer and closer to the splashdown of the crew. They are currently in the deorbit burn, which lasts about 10 minutes or so. Now, as you might imagine, our crew, Michael Lopez Alegria, Larry Connor, Eitan Stibba, and Mark Pathy, have gone through extensive training. Each have between 700 and 1,000 logged hours since mid-2021 of time dedicated to learning the SpaceX protocols, ISS systems, and to prepare for their respective research portfolios. To prepare the Ax-1 crew for their mission, our teams at SpaceX spent the last several months teaching the crew about orbital mechanics, how to live in microgravity, and even running simulations of what the full mission will look like while seated inside Dragon. John, that's that capsule you and I got to visit.
Yeah.
Now, this team has studied nearly 100 different training lessons covering all aspects of the mission. As the commander, Michael focused on guiding his crew through all of their SpaceX, NASA, and space station training. Our trainers have told us that he demonstrated exemplary leadership in building a cohesive crew that can tackle any problem they're given and work together to solve it through effective communication. Now, as the pilot, Larry spent time developing his technical and operational skills as a first-time flyer in order to build a foundation for piloting Crew Dragon. Larry also served as the translator for his mission specialists, breaking down the technical data for his crewmates.
Right, and as mission specialists, Eitan and Mark spent a majority of their training becoming proficient in operating equipment, interfaces, and a suite of other tools at their disposal to support their crew members throughout the ascent, rendezvous, and return portions of this mission. But their training didn't stop there. The Ax-1 crew also completed zero-G flights to become familiar with the microgravity environment, as well as centrifuge training to experience the exact launch and entry profiles that they'll feel during their mission. Additionally, they went through wilderness survival training to simulate and practice high-stress scenarios, and medic training to prepare for potential illnesses that they might experience while on orbit. As the first all-private crew to live and work aboard the ISS, they have been training at NASA facilities, specifically NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, since August 2021. Each crew member has completed training in health, safety, space station systems, and emergency protocols to ensure that they can each work autonomously without interrupting the workflow of other astronauts on board the ISS. And naturally, each crew member has their own portfolio of research that they will conduct or participate in. So many of these studies have required the crew to train on the techniques and best practices of their respective principal investigators, or PIs. So, bottom line, this crew is setting the standard in their approach to training. We talked about this on launch day. They didn't take any of this lightly. They wanted to be a part of the mission and train accordingly. So they have succeeded the requirements of this mission and have certainly surpassed our expectations. This mission represents more than the first fully private flight to the ISS. Ax-1 is establishing many new protocols and means of collaboration between government and private institutions. So as I said, this crew really wanted to actively give back to the ISS and truly be a part of the team. But to do that, you have to go all in 100%, which they did. And by immersing themselves in their training, they really set that bar high for future space flights and partnership efforts.
Yeah, it's really impressive to see just, everything that they've gone through to get to this point. And it paid off, right? Because they ended up being in space almost twice as long as intended.
Exactly right. So they had to know how to live aboard up there. So, all right. Well, 17 days ago, on April 8th, the Ax-1 mission launched from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center aboard a Falcon 9 rocket. Over the next 21 hours, the Dragon Endeavour would carry this crew to the International Space Station, at which time they would become the first ever all-private crew to be welcomed aboard the ISS. Now, of that four-person complement, this journey to space was a first for Larry Connor, the first private pilot to reach the ISS, Mark Pathy, the second private Canadian astronaut and 12th Canadian to go to space, and Eitan Stibba, the first Israeli to live and work aboard the ISS. And there you can see the crew that was welcomed aboard. Larry there in the cupola doing some Earth observations, and Mark and Eitan, again, as mission specialists. So the key mission objectives for Ax-1 have always been scientific research and outreach, primarily. Performing meaningful science while still taking the time to communicate out the impact and application of that research. So space-to-ground events with various institutions allowed a wider audience of students to hear firsthand how on-orbit science directly impacts us back on Earth. And including that, Earth observation activities from the ISS cupola not only provided opportunities to study planetary biology and weather systems, but also allowed crew time to reflect on who we are and where we ultimately come from. But with 10 days scheduled aboard the ISS, not a lot of time, the crew wanted to bring as many people along for the ride as possible. inviting people aboard to see how they lived and operated, how food is prepared and managed. You can see there, looking at some of the meals. Calling to order international scientific committees. Engaging with children at charter schools and science museums, all this outreach regarding STEAM education, fielding their questions about life on orbit, what it is to live aboard the ISS and live in low Earth orbit. And occasionally, in Eitan's case, even speaking with national leaders. Mark was also able to speak with First Nation students about the purification process of drinking water in space. So ultimately, every moment was an opportunity to educate communities around the globe on what we can learn in low Earth orbit, how our individual cultures add to that experience, and ultimately why we choose to go to space. But outreach was only a small fraction of their effort. A lot of their time on orbit was dominated by technology demonstrations and research opportunities. Activities such as conducting the first two-way holoportation that you can see Mark here doing, that really highlighted how interactive augmented reality, has benefits in Earth-based telemedicine as well as long-duration exploration. Eitan got to work on fluidic optical lens development and microgravity. This one was particularly cool to me. I found this really interesting. But the goal there was to show how manufacturing in space can improve optics production for deep space astronomy. Eitan also got to perform a neuro wellness study that assessed cognitive performance and brain activity. And while Mark got to utilize biomonitor studies to investigate new analysis techniques to detect negative effects on key organ functions. But above all else, the crew of Ax-1 wanted to ensure that this mission always tied back to the people on Earth. That somehow, in addition to the significant amount of research performed, the mission ultimately remained grounded in its ability to connect the dots between home and low Earth orbit. Not only appealing to both who we are, but also where we are heading. Ultimately, Ax-1 was a mission that highlighted why we go. So during launch, we highlighted the significant number of research objectives that this crew had. You can see that we touched on only a small fraction of the mission's on-orbit accomplishments. That is only a part of this mission's story. So to see more of what crew accomplished in their time on orbit, please visit axiomspace.com/ax1-research, which you can see in the bottom of your screen.
At this point in time, I am able to confirm that deorbit burn has concluded.
Excellent.
And it was good.
Good.
So we are committed to bringing
Fantastic.
the Axiom-1 crew home today. As we've mentioned before, we are targeting a splashdown off the coast of Florida near Jacksonville, over on the Atlantic side. Now, in the background, Dragon is currently inhibiting those forward bulkhead Draco thrusters that we just used to complete that deorbit burn, ensuring that it's safe to latch the nose cone and shut for reentry. The vehicle has initiated the nitrox suit purge, nitrox being the nitrogen-oxygen mixture, same as you use in your scuba tank. This will help keep the crew cool and comfortable during reentry, which is coming up in just a few minutes. At this point, the nose cone is closing and nearly closed and is protecting that forward hatch during reentry. The crew are using their screens to monitor the locking of the nose cone, which is done by a set of hooks. So there's that awesome microgravity indicator.
Kate, you were mentioning earlier when we could see over the shoulder of MLA and Eitan, or MLA and Larry, excuse me, when we were looking at their screens, you could see, those Draco thrusters firing. Last night I got to watch a bit of the undock, and because it was during a night pass, you really got to see those Draco thrusters firing at night.
Sure,
and that was really cool. So I like that you get to see it on the screen too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty great to be able to see the machine that you're riding in, what it's doing while it's doing it.
Yeah.
As we mentioned before, Dragon is completely autonomous. Everything from the point in which it separates from the second stage to the point that it splashes down. The crew has the ability to act as a backup to Crew Dragon's systems, but the capsule essentially flies itself, which is really important because it's actually safer than if humans were to steer it. And there we can see on the screen the orientation of the Dragon capsule to the Earth. Once again, that is pilot Larry Connor on the right-hand side, well, was on the right-hand side, and Commander Michael Lopez Alegria was on the left.
Right.
So in this view here, on the far left, we have Mission Specialist Mark Pathy, then to his right, Larry Connor, then MLA, and then on the far right, at the other window seat, is Eitan Stibba.
And of course, our stowaway, the zero-G indicator, Caramel from Montreal Children's Hospital. It's good to see.
Yeah. Now that view on your screen there is the Mission Control Center here in Hawthorne, California, SpaceX headquarters. That is where our Dragon controllers are supporting the mission. And as we enter the final phase of this Axiom-1 mission, which of course is the deorbit burn and splashdown. All right, so confirmation there that the nose cone is closed. That is complete. So we have basically closed Dragon back up. We have covered up the forward hatch as well as those forward Draco thrusters, forward being, at the top. And that is the last physical change to the capsule prior to splashdown.
Right, it's essentially buttoned up and ready to go, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as we begin the second half of entry, Dragon is now beginning to flush nitrox into the cabin and continuing to top off the Axiom-1 crew's suits with cool air. Again, this is what will allow the crew to remain comfortable, keep that cabin temperature comfortable, while the external temperatures reach 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. So it gets pretty warm on the outside.
Yeah, a little bit.
The heat shield is pointing forward, leading the capsule to the landing site. Crew Dragon's primary heat shield is comprised of PICA 3.0, which stands for Phenolic Impregnated Carbon Ablator. The first gen PICA was first developed by NASA for studying and sampling comets within our solar system.
Right, and then SpaceX partnered with NASA to develop PICA-X, which was the second-gen product used on the Dragon 1 cargo resupply missions, or CRS missions, that successfully resupplied the space station on 20 missions. PICA 3.0 was then developed specifically for use on Dragon 2 crew and cargo, with enhanced structural and thermal properties that optimized the heat shield and ultimately drove down cost and mass.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah.
The remainder of the Crew Dragon capsule is composed primarily of a SpaceX proprietary ablative material. It's another class of thermal protection which is lighter weight versus PICA and protects the underlying composite structure during reentry to ensure the structural capabilities are maintained.
While Crew Dragon will experience temperatures well over 3,000 Fahrenheit, like Katie just mentioned, during peak reentry conditions, the characteristics of the TPS, or thermal protection systems, coupled with the ECLSS, or environmental control and life support system, is the pressurized interior. And this will ensure that the Axiom-1 crew will stay cool and comfortable during all phases of reentry through splashdown.
Yeah. Now, while we have said previously that this Dragon capsule is reused, it has come to space, it has gone to space and come back twice before, so this is its third mission. We keep all of basically the structures. We do replace that TPS system, that thermal protection system. So that part of the Dragon capsule, those are newer pieces, which explains why, as the views that we saw while the capsule was on orbit at station, it was a beautiful, pristine, white color. Yeah. That's about to change.
That's part of reusable spaceflight, right? You've got to refurbish. So. Yeah. Right. Well, we've talked a lot about the first of this mission and a lot about the historical nature of it. And there are many more that we simply just don't have time to cover. It's been a short mission. But one of the more poignant moments was certainly watching the crew receive their astronaut pins from MLA. Now, this tradition of receiving your astronaut pin is something every astronaut is very proud of. This astronaut pin is a symbol of having ventured to space. It's a major accomplishment. This history of earning your astronaut pin is rooted in the earliest days of space travel, specifically with the Mercury 7, the original 7. They had their own pin denoting their specific flights. Well, since 1963, NASA provides a silver astronaut pin to NASA astronaut candidates once they've completed training and are considered mission ready. Then, once they have actually flown to space, they receive a gold version of that same astronaut pin. I think that's pretty cool. In this new era of private spaceflight, different providers have offered a pin to signify their flight, but there's not been a universally accepted pin for all. The Association of Space Explorers is an internationally recognized association that has kept a registry of all who have traveled to space. This registry separates all space explorers into classifications: suborbital for those who fly up and right back down, passing above 50 miles as they fly, and orbital for those who fly above 50 miles but also around the Earth. So the ASE created a pin and have been providing them to all who have flown to space. The very first one was provided to the family of Yuri Gagarin, the first person to ever fly to space. So the insignia consists of ascending and descending chevrons crowned with a 5-point star representing the journey to space and the return to Earth. A circlet encompassing the chevron is added to the astronaut insignia, awarded for flight into Earth orbit and beyond. This circlet is not present on the suborbital insignia. Well, on this mission, Larry Connor, Eitan Stiba, and Mark Pathy were added to the list of orbital astronauts, and MLA presented them with their ASE orbital pins during the welcome aboard ceremony on the International Space Station. This marked the first time astronauts were presented their ASE orbital pin while on their mission. So at Axiom, we look forward to seeing many more individuals from around the world all earn their own astronaut pin. And if you watched the launch webcast of Ax-1, you know that one of the goals of Axiom Space is to find new ways to promote and foster the creation of space-themed art. So during the countdown on April 8th, Axiom Space launched its very own NFT store, and throughout the mission, new NFTs have been minted and dropped, some of which were personally queued by Mint by the crew while on board the International Space Station. Others were inspired by or based on the efforts of this mission. So as the Ax-1 crew enters the final chapter of their journey, the last round of Ax-1 NFTs are dropping as well. This includes the one-of-a-kind digital sculpture Spacewalker, created by artist Michael Kagan and turned into augmented reality by Anima. So be sure to check it out before the auctions close at nft.axiomspace.com.
Copy that. At this time, I have no notable updates to vehicle status and recovery team status. Weather is still looking great, with no significant change to the numbers I called up previously. I don't believe you have the blackout start and end times, so I have those available for you when ready to copy.
Ready to copy.
All right, blackout start is predicted at 16:53:04, and blackout end at 16:59:40. I'll copy.
I copy start 165304 and end 165940.
Good copy. And that is all I'm tracking for you guys. Let me know once you guys have visors down, restraints tight, and tablets secured later in the timeline.
We will do so. Thanks, sir.
All right, there. So communication with our Axiom 1 crew and SpaceX core, Sarah Gillis there, seated at SpaceX Mission Control, just behind us here in Hawthorne, California, just basically confirming the loss of signal and acquisition of signal timeline. So essentially after we performed that deorbit burn and we had the final trajectory and all that good stuff, we were able to run the calculations for that precise LOS and AOS those points. Important for the crew to know when to ring back home.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and important for all ground teams too that are listening to the nets. Understanding when you're getting an LOS and AOS. You may not hear something for a while, and you're wondering why is that? Well, before you start, thinking about things.
Yeah.
All right. What times are we expecting to lose signal? Right.
Now, for those of you that have just joined us, that LOS or loss of signal or AOS acquisition of signal, that's due to the exterior temperatures of the Dragon capsule reaching 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit as they re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. It sounds scary, but it's actually really helpful. As they are re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, that friction is actually slowing the capsule down.
Right.
Right now they're going 17,500 miles per hour, and the Earth's atmosphere atmosphere will act as that initial slowdown point. They'll feel a couple G's.
Yep, just a few.
They'll re-enter the atmosphere, and basically plasma builds up on the exterior of the capsule, preventing communication in and out with the crew. So it's only going to last 6 minutes, and the crew will be able to check in with us, and then at that point the drogue parachutes will be deploying and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, and then doing the rest of the work.
Yeah,
exactly. Speaking of work, crew on this mission, their main focus was research. Ax-1, really is a research-focused mission, and the goal was to set the standard for future private astronaut crews and usher in a new phase of microgravity research for new government and non-government entrants around the world. The mission included more than 25 science and research investigations during their time aboard the ISS, and it includes the collection of pre- and post-launch physiological data. Now, among the unique attributes of the Ax-1 mission has been the ability for astronauts to curate their own research portfolios in collaboration with leading institutions around the world, in addition to supporting Axiom-managed investigations. So while some of these visuals from the mission are still coming down and being made available, we want to highlight just some of the accomplishments of this crew.
Mark Pathy took part in scientific research projects in partnership with 6 Canadian universities and their investigators, as well as proof of concepts with 2 tech startups, including the world's first in-space demonstration of two-way holoportation. He also conducted Earth observation activities in partnership with the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, or RCGS, and Western University.
Larry Connor's research projects were the result of long-time partnerships with the Mayo Clinic and the Cleveland Clinic. The Ohio native has helped fund groundbreaking research at both institutions for much of the last decade. Connor's experiments on behalf of the Mayo Clinic sought to provide data on space travel's impact on senescent cells and heart health. So while on station, Connor was responsible for maintaining these senescent cells, cells that have stopped dividing, that are returning with him to be studied further. So Connor's ground research with Cleveland Clinic consists of pre- and post-mission high-resolution MRIs to study the effects of the spaceflight environment on spinal and brain tissue.
Eitan Stiba carried out research activities on behalf of several Israeli innovators, the Ramon Foundation, the Israel Space Agency, and the Israeli Ministry of Innovation, Science, and Technology. During his mission, named Rakia, he facilitated scientific experiments and conducted educational and artistic activities to connect the younger generation in Israel and around the globe with the values of peace, innovation, and social responsibility. His research projects include testing radiation personal protective equipment, as well as studies into astronaut eye health, cognitive activity, and much more.
In addition to the crew-curated research portfolios, Axiom Space collaborated with a variety of institutions to conduct several science investigations. Demonstrations ranged from Tesserae, a self-assembling technology for satellites and future space habitats, to the JAMSS JAMS photocatalyst, an air purification technology, and included research studies on modeling tumor organoids, a cancer stem cell study, and participating in the ongoing efforts of the Translational Research Institute for Space Health, also known as TRISH, which calls for pre- and post-flight collections of physiological data. So MLA helped facilitate these Axiom-managed studies, as well as conducting several outreach events. So more information on the incredible works performed by this crew while on the ISS can be found at axiomspace.com/ax1-research.
Missions just like this one will open the door for new countries around the world to pursue and participate in the benefits of human spaceflight.
Exactly. And to that end, at Axiom, we are hard at work building the next destination in low Earth orbit. Axiom Station is being designed as a true continuation and evolution of the International Space Station. So much gained over the last 20-plus years. Axiom's goal is to build upon the successes and lessons learned over that time, while bridging the gap between the ISS and commercial spaceflight. Ultimately, allowing for greater access to that knowledge and capability ensures that humans continue to benefit from time spent in low Earth orbit. At Axiom's first private astronaut missions are crucial steps in learning how the relationships between government and private industry can grow and change.
The International Space Station is really an amazing engineering achievement. In the last 21 years, there's been permanent human presence in space. We've slowly progressed from capsules and vehicles that visited for a short time to places like Skylab, where we ultimately did a 90-day mission back in the 70s. Now we're on ISS for a year or more. And now it's time for the next space station.
Axiom Space is about making living and working in space commonplace. The government has forecasted a demand for flying NASA crew members to low Earth orbit to conduct basic research in furtherance of their goals of deep space exploration.
But then we also want to expand what can be done in space. 15 years from now, 20 years from now, we're going to be surrounded by objects that we can't live without that we're manufacturing in space.
Today, we are in the process of building our first two elements. We have subsystems in development. We have a full lab of life support hardware that we're putting through its paces. We are building a propulsion system. It's a lot of those details in developing a space station.
You know, the first two modules are being built by our partner, Thales Alenia, and we're heading to what is called CDR, which is a critical design review. That really means that 90% of the design is done, and then you're ready to go to manufacturing. So HAB1 is that first module. It has 4 crew quarters, it has payload accommodations, and it has all of the systems required to keep crew healthy and alive. So the plan is we'll fly 4 separate modules to the ISS. When we arrive with the 4th module, it'll have what we need to be independent of the ISS.
So a lot of thought went into how do we allow it to grow. When we look at the future, we have thoughts on how we could double the number of crew every 5 years.
There's a lot of excitement here about the Ax-1 mission. Everyone understands that it's a very historic mission. We are just so excited to be part of that and having our people enable this historic moment.
The Ax-1 mission provides us the opportunity to refine our flight techniques and operations concepts in order to meet the higher complexity of operating a space station in orbit. That moment where we're captured and birthed to the International Space Station will be a moment that defines how we move forward as a species in low Earth orbit. This will be really the first time a fully commercial element has been part of the complex.
Axiom Station is going to allow humanity to be a multi-planet species. When we pull that off, we change the world.
So at this point in time, the crew, they are in Dragon Endeavour. They are in their seats. Their suits are on. Their visors are down. And they are about 5 minutes away from LOS, or loss of signal. They are basically preparing to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. So they undocked from the International Space Station yesterday at 9:10 p.m. Eastern. The Dragon capsule performed a couple of maneuvers to basically line everything up in preparation for re-entry. We jettisoned the Dragon trunk to expose the heat shield, and we closed the nose cone after performing a deorbit burn, which was the final burn. That's the burn that locked us in, committed us to splashdown today. So once that burn was concluded, we shut the nose cone, locked it up, and now the crew is just waiting to come back home.
Exactly right. So we've got about, it's looking like 16, 17 minutes until splashdown. That's correct?
Yeah.
So crew has had a long time on orbit. Originally they were supposed to have 10 days. They've got 15 days on the ISS, 17 in full spaceflight orbit. You mentioned yesterday they undocked at 1:10 GMT, and they had about, 16 hours, 16-hour travel time. So they got a few extra orbits in there as well.
Yeah. They've had a few extra everything on this mission.
Exactly right. But they've been making the most of it. They went into this mission with a huge suite of research on their plate, and I think that extra added opportunity that extra time, just highlighted if we have opportunities up there, we want to learn more, right? We just saw in the video what we're trying to learn from this mission really is, how do we all work together to continue this amazing experiment that has been sustained low Earth orbit for 20 plus years? One of my favorite things at Mission Control at Johnson Space Center is the ISS mission elapsed time. And you go and you see that, and it dawns on you how long that vehicle has been up there operating. We want to continue that. Everybody working in private spaceflight wants to continue that and everything that we benefit from. So seeing that video, us talking about the vehicle coming home, seeing the multiple patches inside the Dragon today, it's all part of that story.
Yeah.
It's all part of that mission. So even if that mission is 10 days or 15, we get a lot out of it, and we learn a lot from it. So
yeah. Now, for those of you that have just joined us or might not be familiar with, what the Ax-1 crew has been up to, they did launch on, when was that? April 8th. The mission was initially intended to be an 8-day mission. It ended up being 15 days.
Right.
So if you 15 days on station, total of 17 days on orbit. Unfortunately, the weather just wasn't willing to play nice with us around Florida. As we mentioned before, we have 7 recovery options around Florida, both on the Gulf side and the Atlantic side. And we take into account lots of different things, lightning possibility, precipitation levels, wave height, wind speeds, all kinds of things to make sure that the crew as well as the recovery teams are safe for the operations. And unfortunately, we just haven't been able to pull that off for the last week, even with those 7 options, those 7 locations. So fortunately, as I mentioned before, we are fully committed to splashdown, having performed that final deorbit burn. We are intending to splash down off the coast of Florida on the Atlantic side near Jacksonville. And the weather is beautiful today. We are super go with our weather conditions.
There's that term. We're waiting for the super go.
Yeah. So we are expecting loss of signal to begin at around the 53-minute mark, which is now. So waiting to hear on the nets the call out for that. Once again, the crew are expecting this. This 6-minute LOS period. Wait, that's not 6 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah, there we go.
6 minute LOS.
So totally anticipated. Every crew that we have brought back down to Earth has gone through this at that point in time. The capsule is re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. It's actually using the friction provided by the atmosphere to slow the capsule down prior to the drogue chute deployment. The crew was going 17,500 miles per hour. That's the velocity, the speed of the space station. And so the Earth's atmosphere actually acts as that initial slowdown period.
Right, that's the drag that we get to help slow it down efficiently.
Absolutely. Right. So once we get through the atmosphere, the capsule's then going about 350 miles per hour, at which point we deploy through 2 drogue parachutes, which provide initial slowdown as well as stabilization. And then after the 2 initial drogue parachutes are deployed, we get the 4 mains, which are those orange and white parachutes that are very iconic, super noticeable, and we are hoping to have all of that views of that soon. But right now, the crew they are in an expected loss of signal, and we expect this to go on for a few minutes.
Exactly right. Yeah, at this point they're just suited up and kind of waiting. Right, Dragon's doing all the work. Crew is monitoring, obviously, and following along for the ride. But they are suited up, they are visors down, and they are waiting for splashdown.
So there on your screen, you can see Mission Control Center here in Hawthorne, California, just right behind John and I. And the crews there are monitoring the telemetry and everything that we can track on Dragon. As we mentioned before, that communication, that's not an option because that heat shield is slowing the vehicle down significantly. The external temperatures of Dragon reach about 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. There's plasma building up on the side of it, and so that's what prevents the ability to really get any telemetry or communication from the capsule at that point in time. But we will hopefully be able to get views of the capsule. Well, of course, we'll bring that to you as we have those available. The first shot might be a thermal shot. That's what it has been in the past.
Well, we heat it up to 3,500 degrees. It's a little easier to see.
Infrared's going to catch that for sure. But at this point, the crew they're in their seats. They're buckled up. I think it's about 4 Gs that they experience during the re-entry period, but it's they've trained for it.
Exactly.
It's about the same as they experience throughout liftoff as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So as I mentioned before, at this point we're in that communications blackout period, lasting about 6 or 7 minutes due to the formation of plasma around the spacecraft. During this time, no vehicle telemetry is received by mission control or the recovery team, and no external commanding of the vehicle or voice communication, as I mentioned, is possible. Now, as a reminder, Dragon is designed to fly itself and continues to autonomously use its Draco thrusters in order to orient itself during reentry. During reentry, the vehicle will be slowing down from its orbital velocity, which, as I mentioned before, is about 17,500 miles per hour, down to about 350 miles per hour. And the top temperature that Dragon will experience upon reentry is 3,500 degrees, which sounds toasty. I always like to say that we get a toasted marshmallow back from space because that white thermal protection system, or TPS, as you hear us refer it to, it does get toasty, but the crew, they're comfortable, right?
Right. And that TPS system, that's doing all of the hard work to keep crew safe, right? The ECLA systems inside the pressurized part of the vehicle are also doing the same to keep crew safe, to keep them comfortable. But those two systems have a very, very important job to do. In addition to the drogue parachutes, like you mentioned, right? Each of these systems, as part of the overall Dragon capsule, has a very specific and choreographed aspect to safely allow crew to re-enter.
Absolutely.
And then once they splash down, there it's ground teams. Ground teams are really carrying, ensuring that the vehicle is safe.
And there's our first view of Dragon Endeavour re-entering the Earth's atmosphere with the Axiom-1 crew.
Heat shield doing all that work to keep that ablative heat, or to keep the heat ablated from the vehicle as it's re-entering at those speeds.
Yeah, so this is a shot from our infrared tracking camera. Once again, the crew, they're slowing down from their orbital velocity of 17,500 miles per hour. That heat shield is utilizing the Earth's atmosphere to help slow the vehicle down. Once again, we are in an expected loss of signal, or LOS period. Essentially, we're not able to receive any communication from the crew at this point in time, but as I said before, expected. The crew knows that. The teams on the ground here know that.
Right, and that was one of the critical roles earlier at beginning acquisition.
Dragon SpaceX ComCheck.
Loud and clear, Sarah. Cruise to its fine.
Copy that. Great to hear from you.
All right, there we heard the voice of Commander MLA, Michael Lopez Alegria. They're just confirming that the crew, they're doing good.
Right on schedule, too.
Yeah. As we mentioned before, the external temperature of the capsule is about 3,500 degrees as it, makes its way through the Earth's atmosphere, but the crew, they're comfortable inside.
Dragon, you can expect automated parachute deploy at standard altitude.
Copy that, sir.
All right, so just a heads up there to the crew that they can expect to feel those initial drogue parachutes deploy.
Right.
As I was saying before, the crew's comfortable. While the exterior of the capsule is warming up, we are purging the internal cabin and their suits with nitrox, or nitrogen-oxygen mixture, to keep them comfortable and cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So, as we're waiting for confirmation that Dragon chutes have deployed, just prior to the deployment of the initial drogue chutes, Dragon will automatically safe the propulsion system. Dragon then deploys its drogue parachutes to stabilize and decelerate the vehicle, like you mentioned earlier, Kate.
Now, just before the deployment of those drogue parachutes, seats automatically rotate 26 degrees to keep the crew within acceptable or G limits for entry and landing. Without the drogue chutes, we would have to make the mains 3 times stronger and heavier. And of course, everything about spaceflight is about weight.
Right.
So if
Dragon SpaceX, brace for drogue window.
Racing.
All right, so just a couple moments here until those drogue parachutes are released. Shortly after the drogues are released, we'll see the release of the main parachutes, which help to further decelerate the vehicle and allow the vehicle to proceed safely to the splashdown zone in the Atlantic Ocean. The vehicle's velocity at drogue deployment is about 350 miles per hour, and they deploy at about 18,000 feet.
from that deploy, it's a pretty quick succession of events, right? We deploy the drogues very quickly after. There we go. You're seeing the drogues deploy now.
Live view from onboard Dragon Endeavour of those drogue parachutes. Capsule's going about 350 miles per hour.
Nominal descent rate for 2 healthy drogues.
Copy, sir.
It's what you love to hear from inside the capsule.
Exactly.
Because unfortunately they can't see
Right.
the parachutes, so to hear that call out that their drogues are healthy, it's great news. So there's a better shot of those
Beautiful
drogue
shot of the
parachutes
drogues
from our
doing their
tracking
work.
camera.
You know, and having that single voice of the core, talking to crew, letting crew know that they're going into a planned LOS, and then coming back. All right, there's the 4 mains deploying.
All right, so
We have visual on 4 mains.
So there we heard that confirmation of 4 mains deploying.
And descent rate nominal.
Gorgeous shot of those 4 main parachutes.
1,000 meters.
Copy 1,000 meters.
So just the crew reporting that they're only 1,000 meters
Right.
from splashdown.
Right.
Landing in water is simpler, therefore more reliable, and it provides more margin against unlikely parachute issues. You know, we had to learn how to make Dragon waterproof, but once you do, that's it. It's a rinse, review, reuse type process.
Right.
800 meters.
Copy 800.
Once again, our Axiom-1 crew is targeting a splashdown in the Atlantic Ocean at our Jacksonville recovery zone. The recovery teams are in the area waiting for that splashdown confirmation.
Scheduled for about 2 minutes from now, according to our clocks.
600 meters.
Copy 600.
So we can see that capsule there, as I mentioned before, you know, when we saw it on station and of course during launch, it was pure white.
Right.
It is no longer.
Right.
We now have really a beautiful shot of that toasted marshmallow. You know, that thermal protection, those thermal protection systems,
Right.
you know, keep the crew safe.
Copy 400.
Right. And like you said, you know, that's a testament to the design of the vehicle doing exactly what it was designed to do and what it has to do
Absolutely.
to do it safely. And like you said, rinse, reuse, right? It's all part of reusable spaceflight.
First live view of our crew there from inside the Dragon capsule now that they have re-entered the Earth's atmosphere.
200 meters, bracing for impact.
Copy bracing.
I think I see that 0G indicator in the lap of Mission Specialist Mark Pathy there.
That's right. The crew is looking comfortable in their view that we saw there, ready to splash down just a few moments from now. And right now, I think those parachutes slowed the vehicle down to about, is that
About 15 miles per hour. Yep. As you can tell by the cheers behind us, we can confirm that the Dragon capsule with the Ax-1 crew has splashed down. Dragon Endeavour has returned home with the Axiom-1 crew.
Dragon SpaceX, we see splashdown and mains cut.
We concur.
The SpaceX recovery ship and team that you see there on your screen has been waiting for Dragon splashdown, and they're now making their way to that location.
On behalf of the entire SpaceX team, welcome back to planet Earth. The Axiom-1 mission marks the beginning of a new paradigm for human spaceflight. We hope you enjoyed the extra few days in space, and thanks for choosing to fly with SpaceX.
Sarah, to you, Ken, the team, and MCC, and all the teams that have supported us, all the engineers, technicians, great job. We're very grateful for the mission. Thank you.
All right, well, good calls there from MLA and Core.
And we copy all.
Crew excited to be home. All of us on ground happy to have crew back home. Now, the teams have been ready and waiting for about three nautical miles away, so it's going to take them about 30 minutes to make their way to get the crew inside Dragon.
So there we can see those 2 drogue parachutes, which were released, of course, first, and then, you know, they are let go in order to release the mains. That's what we see making their way back to Earth as well, of course.
The whole system comes back.
Yeah.
Sarah, we're in section 3. We think we're in stable 2. We can't see very well out the windows. Disregard me. That's stable 1.
And Dragon, your comm is getting pretty hard to hear. Maybe we can have Larry relay some of that.
Yes, Sarah, we're just confirming we've got fog freezing on the windows that we are in stable 1. Certainly feels like it appears to be.
Copy that, Larry, and can confirm we see stable 1 as well.
Stay out of the way. My thanks to you, everybody, all the people who have supported us around the world. Just amazing job and amazing mission.
Appreciate the words, Larry.
So that was our pilot, Larry Connor, also just expressing his thanks. Now we can see the Dragon capsule. So I just want to, you know, kind of inform a little bit about what those calls were. So we heard the crew basically wanting to confirm stable 1, stable 2. So that's basically just the position that the capsule splashes down in. So stable 1 being this primary upright. Stable 2 would be like it's a little bit more on its side, and that's why they said we can't really tell, can't quite see out the window. I have a feeling they were like, well, based on the way that we're fitting in the sea, we think we're this way. So that's just confirmation of the position that. False Quindar tone.
Yeah, false Quindars. You hear Quindars, you key up.
Yeah, so the recovery teams are now starting to approach the Dragon capsule.
Dragon SpaceX, we are go for recovery personnel to approach. You can expect personnel alongside in about 1 minute.
Perfect. So there's that safe approach call.
Understand. 1 minute.
Yeah, so the reason why the recovery team doesn't just rush there, so Dragon is loaded with hypergolic propellants, monomethyl hydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide, and they are toxic when you breathe them. So for the safety of the crew, both inside and the recovery team, we wait for Dragon to basically double, triple check that all of those vents and everything are closed off and there's no venting from the Dragon capsule, like from those Draco thrusters themselves. So that's what that communication was in terms of making sure that we got the okay from the capsule, and then Mission Control gave the okay to the recovery team. And we can see them there. There will be an individual that actually climbs on top of the capsule, and they are placing the harnessing and
the rigging essentially for hoist.
Exactly. The equipment that's required in order to lift Dragon onto the recovery vessel. Infrared shot there of that fast boat, as we call it, approaching, and they're basically doing another sniffing test, essentially, where you can see that the team has PPE on, personal protection equipment. respirators
Yeah, they got a
to
respirator
do
mask there.
a triple check that the vehicle is not releasing any of those toxic hypergolic vapors.
Right. As we mentioned earlier, this is a very, coordinated maneuver, right? The weather has to be right. The area has to be clear. We mentioned how it's important that, other people are not in the area because this is, as Kate mentioned, you have the safety aspects of the hypergol that you need to worry about, but also just what crew is trying to do there. That's not an easy thing to do in the water. Having done a few boat maneuvers myself, it's not that easy to be doing what they're doing. So having the area clear for these teams to work and make contact with crew, but while also performing these maneuvers is really important. And you can see as well why we had to wait for such a super go for clear conditions and weather on a splashdown day. Even with nominal seas like that, this is an operation that takes a lot of attention and a lot of work on ground crew's side.
Now, one thing I want to mention, we have talked about Commander MLA Michael Lopez Alegria, how he has been to space before. This is the first time that he has made a water landing.
You're right.
So,
You're right.
He landed back on land with the space shuttle and the Soyuz.
Right.
So this water landing, we gotta keep it interesting, right?
Exactly.
Gotta get to do something new.
Yeah.
So there we can see one of the SpaceX recovery team members has climbed on board Dragon in order to start essentially equipping Dragon with the things that we need in order to lift it or hoist it up onto the recovery vessel.
Right. So on that note, Kate, looking ahead at some of the operations ahead of us, once the team is done rigging, the next big phases of this are really to bring a recovery ship. We're waiting for
Dragon, SpaceX, com check.
I have you loud and clear, sir. I'll be.
Have you loud and clear as well? Just wanted to verify a comm configuration update. For awareness, it appears we have a couple parachutes that are going to need to be towed out of the way for the recovery ship to approach. So there might be a slight delay to schedule, but we'll get you an update on timing soon.
Copy all.
All right, so on your screen, we could see the recovery teams basically lassoing the Dragon capsule in preparation. Now, we did hear a little bit of new information there from SpaceX Core, which is the Crew Operations and Resources Engineer, Sarah Gillis, just letting us know that a couple of those parachutes that came down with the Dragon capsule, that, once the Dragon capsule lands, we cut the lines to those parachutes so that, if there is a little bit of wind, the Dragon capsule doesn't get pulled along with the parachutes. Now, those parachutes, we do recover them, and we just heard some information there that we need to basically move them out of the way in order for that recovery vessel to make, the larger recovery vessel, the primary vessel, to make its way to the splashdown site.
Right, which you can see the team's doing there, right? Pulling some of the parachute out of the way. And it's a good call on Core to, have that comm check and then let crew know, hey, there's been a slight deviation to the schedule, all nominal, all's good, but want to give you a heads up.
If I were inside Dragon capsule, I would really appreciate that information because, as we see how the ships, how those boats are moving and how the capsule is moving, that movement is a little less dynamic right now. But a couple minutes ago, I was watching the Dragon capsule, and I thought I would probably be feeling a little unwell,
right,
with that rocking motion. So, just for mental preparation and stabilization, knowing, all right, I might have 2 or 3 extra minutes to get through this.
Kind of acclimate
I can
myself
do this.
a little bit. I can hold on, right.
Dragon, SpaceX for internal video.
Go ahead, sir.
If If y'all are feeling up to it, request permission to come on board via the display camera view only.
Permission granted.
Copy that.
So soon we should be getting an internal view of crew inside the Dragon capsule.
For those that have just recently joined us, after 17 days on orbit, 15 of those days on the International Space Station, we can see that the Axiom-1 crew has returned home to planet Earth. Just a few minutes ago, they made their splashdown in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Florida near Jacksonville. And there we can see our recovery teams working the capsule in preparation for lifting it onto the recovery vessel. And there we have a shot of Mission Control Center here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California, where John and I are located.
Yeah. You know what I particularly loved? Oh, there's a great shot from inside the Dragon. So this is just after splashdown now. We've got a shot over the shoulders of Commander MLA and pilot Larry Connor. So they're waiting inside the Dragon to be hoisted up now.
We can see that they have lifted their visors, so that's the clear part there, which is currently on top of their helmet, but during the dynamic portions of the mission, so for launch, for docking, for undocking,
right,
and for splashdown, we do ask them to close their visors.
Right.
So now they're able to open it up and as we mentioned before, we have been flushing the interior of the cabin as well as the inside their spacesuits themselves with cool nitrox, nitrogen-oxygen mixture, in order to keep the crew comfortable,
exactly,
throughout the recovery process.
It's amazing to me all the work that those suits do. Right, we were talking just what feels like a few days ago during launch about how those suits keep them cool. Even just from the drive from launch, from the launch pad, or from the suit room out to the launch pad and then up through the vehicle. But all the work that they do while on orbit and then coming back down. Earlier, Kate, when you showed the shot, or when we saw the shot of Mission Control during splashdown, for those who weren't able to join us while we were splashing down, I loved hearing the cheers from everybody here. It was something I expected on launch day, but it's moving to hear it on splashdown too. It shows how many people are vested in the entirety of the mission, not just launching, not just on-orbit operations, but coming back to, a mission is start to finish.
Absolutely.
And that was really, really comforting to hear. Early Monday morning here, there are still people standing outside of Mission Control here.
Oh, 100%.
Cheering it on. I love it.
We wouldn't miss it.
Yeah.
Live view there inside Dragon Endeavour with the Ax-1 crew. They have splashed down in the Atlantic Ocean, and the recovery teams are working to prepare the capsule for lift onto the recovery vessel. After Dragon is on the recovery vessel and fastened down, the teams will actually open up the side hatch and poke their head in and get a quick thumbs up from the crew, and one by one we'll see the crew egress or exit from the capsule using that side hatch. So once that side hatch opens, it's actually the first time it's opened since it closed on launch day, because in order to get on board and exit the space station to egress and all that good stuff, we use the forward hatch, the hatch that's at the top of the capsule.
But that nose cone was covering, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the side hatch hasn't been open since launch day. So they got into the capsule on launch day. That side hatch was closed, and so when that side hatch opens today, it's their first breath of fresh air since taking off.
As we noted earlier, it's going to take a bit of time for the recovery vessel to make its way to Dragon. We got a call from Core saying that we had to get some parachutes out of the way so the ship can make a safe approach. But at this point, the rigging teams are working to make sure that Dragon is ready to be hoisted on that vessel as soon as it gets there.
Yeah, absolutely. As we've mentioned before, you heard us say it already today. You heard us say it a ton on launch day. Everything is carefully choreographed when it comes to space flight. The fact that the Core communicated to the crew just to let them know, hey, there's a slight delay, or you can anticipate a slight delay. It's all about safety is what it comes down to. The safety of the crew on board, as well as the safety of the support teams. In this case, the recovery teams there in the water with the crew.
Right.
That is priority number one above all else, and just making sure that everything is planned for step by step. And even in, I don't want to call the parachutes in the way off nominal, because that is a normal thing to happen, but it wasn't, we didn't plan for it, right?
Yeah.
So, for something like that where it's like, okay, the parachutes are in the way, cool, we have margin.
Dragon SpaceX for private medical conference.
And you have procedures for that as well.
Absolutely.
Go ahead with PMC.
For awareness,
All right, so we're hearing that we're about 7 minutes out until we get to lift Dragon Endeavour onto the recovery vessel that you see there on your screen. The arch that individual there standing at the end of the ship, there's an arch above them, and that arch will actually articulate downward. And the teams in the water will attach the harnessing and everything required to hoist or lift Dragon out of the water and into that cradle there. Fun fact, that recovery vessel, that recovery vessel is named Megan after Megan MacArthur,
Fantastic.
who was our pilot for the Crew 2 mission. Our other recovery vessel for Dragon capsules, which, as we mentioned before, there's 7 sites around Florida. We have one recovery vessel here in the Atlantic, that's Megan. The other Dragon recovery vessel located in the Gulf is Shannon, for, of course, Shannon Walker, who was the first woman to fly on a Dragon capsule. So we have Megan and Shannon on board in our hearts, and of course in name here with our recovery vessels.
There we can see Megan making a slower approach now, coming up to Dragon Endeavour.
So once Dragon splashes down, there's a couple of fast boats. I should preface by saying that the recovery team is about 2 or 3 miles away from the splashdown site. For safety reasons, nobody can be super close, and so the team is situated close, but not too close. And those fast boats, the smaller boats.
Dragon SpaceX, I copied comm on the whining noise. Do you have any insight of when that started?
I think it started right at splashdown.
Copy that.
I was about to ask you about it. It's fairly high pitch, quite loud, and it varies in frequency a little. It's hard to tell if it's mechanical fan ventilation of some kind, or maybe some kind of Ascot event. Hard to tell.
So just a little.
Copy, Dragon. We hear it. Likely it is caused by a bilge pump that started at splashdown. We're going to attempt to power that pump off. Let us know if it resolves.
Copy.
All right, so just a little bit of interesting communication there with the crew inside Dragon Endeavour as well as our team here in Mission Control. So when the crew was speaking, that was Commander Michael Lopez Alegria, the teams here were able to hear background noise. And so obviously the crew inside Dragon Endeavour are able to hear that as well. So that was just a little bit of back and forth describing where the sound may have been coming from or what it could have sounded like, and it sounds like it might be one of the onboard pumps that activates at splashdown.
Endeavour, whatever you just did, stop it.
Right. Good work
Copy
around.
all. It was the bilge pump.
There we go.
It's what we do. We solve problems.
Exactly. It's the life of a flight controller. Right?
Absolutely. So the recovery teams are, as I mentioned before, they're positioned close to the splashdown site, but a safe distance away. Upon splashdown, the fast boats make their way out quickly to do the initial safing and preparation of the capsule, making sure that the hypergolic propellants are not leaving any vapors around the capsule. And here we can see our recovery vessel, Megan, making its way slowly but surely to the capsule and its splashdown site. Once again, the capsule will be hoisted up onto the deck into that cradle. And in a very sleek and swift motion, that cradle moves forward toward the platform where we will see the crew egress and head into the medical bays. Once again, when that side hatch opens, it's the first time that side hatch has opened since launch day, which was back on April 8th.
First breath of fresh air since April 8th. And earlier, Kate, you were mentioning, every bit of this operation, I mean, for all of spaceflight, is safety first, right? And when you're this close to the finish line, it's even more critical to, follow those procedures, to
absolutely
take it slow and steady, right? Everybody wants to get across that finish line right now, but the mission's not over till they're safely back on board and you can open that hatch and get that breath of fresh air, right? So,
for sure.
Those fast boats make that initial contact, and Megan is coming up, in good time, following along with the timeline and making sure that we safely get Dragon back on board.
We can see that there are some swells in the water today, but the waves themselves are, almost non-existent. Really small waves there. We can see that skies are mostly blue with some clouds, as we mentioned before, with all of the weather factors that we take into account for, so things like precipitation levels, wind speeds, wave height, lightning in the area.
Yeah.
Those are all factors that play into whether or not we get the go for undocking and the go for splashdown, which, over the last few days has been the challenging factor for us. As we mentioned before, the crew was originally supposed to be in space for 8 days, ended up being in space for 17 days due to those weather restrictions, essentially, where we just couldn't get go criteria met for those various conditions.
All those variables have to add up to the right solution, right? And you can have one variable, it's great, we don't have a lot of wind, but if you have rain in the area, it makes it really difficult to do those 24-hour go, no-go calls. Okay, so right now it looks like we can see that the recovery teams are preparing to lower the vessel's hydraulic lift mechanism into the water, which will bring the spacecraft into the on-deck translation system known as the nest. So Dragon will remain in the nest during the crew extraction and for the journey back into port. And the capsule is currently being lifted and set on the nest. Then once it's centered and oriented, Dragon will then be translated into the hangar underneath the helipad aboard the ship so that we can open the hatch. Once open, a SpaceX medical doctor will be the first one in to check on MLA, Larry, Aton, and Mark and see if they are ready to egress out of the vehicle.
So we can see that hydraulic lift has been lowered, and they'll begin to hoist Dragon up onto the deck.
There's that crew member you mentioned who climbs aboard Dragon to ensure that the rigging gets established properly to pull the capsule back in.
Dragon SpaceX, brace for
Boom.
capsule lift.
One of my favorite parts of recovery is watching that individual. It's safe to say that, recovery operations, there's a lot of training that goes into it, especially for that position.
Exactly right.
To stay on top of the capsule as it's moving around and do everything safely.
And accurately, making sure that your hoist system is ready to hoist, right? Which we can see there now.
All right, so the Ax-1 crew is now out of the water, making their way onto the deck of our recovery vessel, Megan. We can see some water splashing out there from the part of the capsule where the parachutes were stowed in. So that now is empty. With the side hatch just above. So that side hatch is where the astronauts will egress from. Before we open the hatch, the spacecraft's cabin pressure has to be equalized with the outside environment. And once the hatch is opened, like we mentioned before, that'll be the Ax-1's crew first breath of fresh air since they boarded Falcon 9 at the very start of their mission just earlier this month on April 8th. So there we can see that the capsule is now seated in that cradle, and that cradle will then be pulled what looks like towards us, which is actually towards the front of the boat and closer to the bays.
That ablative shield of the capsule, the TPS, is sitting on what looks like a cradle.
Dragon SpaceX, welcome aboard the recovery vessel. Recovery personnel are completing final checks and stand by for translation to the egress platform.
Copy all, sir. We're standing by.
So we can see the recovery team there, once again doing testing to make sure that any hypergol vapors have dissipated, that the capsule is not releasing any more of those vapors. As I mentioned before, the propellants that Dragon uses on board, it's different than the rocket propellants. The rocket propellants, we use our RP1 and liquid oxygen, and in order for those to burn, we have an ignition source, which is our TTEB. So, it's like when you light a match, right? There's a flame or a spark, and it's different on Dragon. There is no flame on Dragon. The propellants combust instantaneously whenever they come into contact. That monomethyl hydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide, and they're super powerful. That's why we use them on board Dragon for those Draco engines. But they are toxic if you inhale them. So we can see the crew there had their ventilators on, and they're just performing those final tests to make sure that the Dragon Dracos are not venting any of those hypergols. It's pretty amazing to see. It has been amazing to see the pictures while the capsule was, on station. Some of them they don't look real. It's so beautiful, but it is real. And to see, images before splashdown and after splashdown, it's incredible because it just shows, how effective